It is 11. It is 11:30 somewhere. Welcome everybody to another incredible episode with Rev Genius. So, want to quickly thank the co-host and sponsor Tario for being a part of this incredible webinar. You all, over 300 of you signed up today, and for good reason. We're going to be going through some really incredible content. I have 3 incredible guests, and I just want to start with like a quick icebreaker. Backstage, we're talking about where some of these panelists are from, or where Katie thinks some of the panelists are from. Why don't we drop where you're calling from, or where you're dialing in from, in the comments to the right. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. Mason is not from Gary, Indiana. Katie is in Costa Rica now. And Samvit, you're in India, is that right?
Yep, Mumbai.
So Mumbai, awesome. So in the comments, drop in. And then one other quick thing. The comments are for asking questions, having conversation. For the next 1 minute, they're also for dropping your LinkedIn. And we're going to have a tremendous conversation today. But outside of this, stay connected with other members of the community on LinkedIn and Slack, et cetera. So without further ado, just some quick background, like every outbound tool in the market claims to be agentic. We've heard of this. Most of what they've automated was never the problem, and some of what they're automating is quietly wrecking your reply rates, your data, and your reps' judgment. So I have, thinking through this, sales leaders don't need more autonomy. They need to know exactly where autonomy earns its keep and where a human still has to be in the loop. Samvit, the CEO of Tario, will be leading the conversation. We also have Katie and Mason, some tremendous folks joining. And I'm going to pass it over to you, Samvit.
Yep. So just a little bit of a view of what we're going to be covering with both of our incredible speakers here. I think maybe Katie, we can start with you, right? A little bit of a hot take where is agentic AI a buzzword? And today when vendors do come to you, everybody's positioning a product as agentic. All those SEO headlines are with that, etc. How do you really differentiate between that and what do you look through and look at real value?
Yeah, I think agentic absolutely can be a buzzword. Right now, it seems like everybody and their mother is calling anything with an LLM attached to it an agent. Mm-hmm. And for me, I think the difference is autonomy, right? So if I'm still giving a tool every single instruction, I think that's basically an assistant. An agent should be able to take an objective and understand the context, decide what action makes the most sense, and then actually execute on some of those actions. But for sales leaders, I think it's the more important question is not like, is this technically agentic? But it's what am I comfortable allowing this thing to own? Outbound involves real people. There's a huge difference between, letting an agent research 500 accounts overnight and letting an agent reach out and actually independently send 500 messages pretending to be one of my SDRs. So I'm very pro AI, but I think AI should make SDRs dramatically better at being human. I don't think it should try to eliminate the human part of the job.
Absolutely. And the way I would put it is automation and agentic is exactly the difference that you have said. If the system is just going overnight and reaching out to a bunch of people in an automated fashion, we may not want to call that truly agentic and taking control. Mason, what's your view on this in terms of how we distinguish general automation with some LLM intelligence and being truly agentic?
Yeah, I mean, similar to what Katie said, I think it's thrown around too often. I was actually just doing a quick Google search because I still use Google on occasion. And apparently the first references in MarTech around AI started to show up in 2014 with programmatic advertising. So I think people have been associating with AI and like really at first AI was just like really complex automations. And today I think about the difference of I started to build out agents and I give them a brief and then they go and actually execute work and then send me back questions. And then like we have a dialogue around how to accomplish the work that they need to get done versus automation is all entire hard rules based. That is a series of if then statements. Again, when I'm working with an actual agent, it's not if then statements. It's, hey, I'm trying to build out this series of workflows and these reports and I'm running up against this issue because I can't find this property. Is it maybe under a different name? That's a totally different approach to actually how work gets accomplished. So again, in general, I think the word is misused by most vendors today. And I think that when you actually look at what agentic looks like, it feels more like another employee than just a workflow.
Absolutely. And, some of those things come down to the edge cases and cases where real judgment is required and if the else statement cannot be very useful. Katie, what do you think on that in terms of, how we look at those things?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Mason, I don't know what your take is. Why don't you go first on this one? Because I don't know that I heard the question properly.
Yeah, can you say the question one more time? I want to make sure I've got it.
Yeah, so let's say, a lot of edge cases where maybe just a pure automation and how we decide on certain aspects may not be the most useful. Do you think, agentic AI there could be more useful, and that's what we truly, differentiate between an agent and an automation platform?
From my perspective, agents are best trained on SOPs. So SOPs meaning like standard operating processes. And the way that I try to build out SOPs are based on 80% use cases. So when you start to see these edge cases come up, I actually do think that's where a human is best served, because humans will then have additional context that may not be in the agent's environment. That is pattern recognition from, I've worked all these other instances, I've had a past job. Like if you think about agents are typically trained on the company's data, whereas humans are trained over the life of their career. So I actually think edge cases are a great use case for humans over agents, and agents are great for the 80% standard that happens more often than not.
Yeah, I would say that I agree with that. I mean, we've experimented with, having agents kind of looking at customer data to make decisions on edge cases. But ultimately, I think it always comes down to a human ultimately making the call and kind of double checking how the AI and the agent is making that decision.
So Mason, from an account point of view, where do you think agents would be really good at, and maybe give us an example of, where do you think, this judgment and agentic AI is really useful?
Yeah. So for quick context on like how I think about everything from a marketing perspective, it's typically through a 4D framework. So that's data, distribution, destination, and direction, which is tracking. So I think that there's agentic use cases on all of them. I think the best place though is typically on the data component. So I'll give a quick example. I was helping a friend that is in the commercial cleaning space build out an ABM program. So I like this example because I think most of the examples we hear are like fun MarTech or sales tech, but like this guy closes $600,000 a month deals cleaning like robotics manufacturing facilities. So like totally different edge case than you hear most of the time. He wanted to break more into the medical space. And one of the things that we did is we trained agents on how to source signals. So I took all of his customer data, I uploaded it into our customer profile analysis tool. And then based on that, we found that medical was the best. And we then tried to work through what are the best signals that would indicate that a medical facility would need a better commercial cleaner. And I didn't come up with this, but our agents then went and searched the Department of Health to find that the Department of Health by state and at a federal level actually shares violation codes at a cleaning level by address. So we were able to then map not just best fit customer. We then took that to an additional level down and built individual buildings by zip code, and then map that a further level down to say they have in the past 12 months had a health cleaning violation that indicates that they need to have a better cleaner. And then their organization knew that if you have a health code violation and you accept Medicare or Medicaid until that has been remedied and you pass your health inspection, you no longer get Medicare or Medicaid payments, which means you can't make payroll. So the cost of action for having a single violation is gigantic. And there's publicly accessible information that enables us to have signals on where to focus. That's never going to show up in Apollo. That's never going to show up in, not to name any one organization, but like that's not going to show up in a data enrichment tool because that's such a specific and niche thing. But agents that can crawl the internet, we can then set up in an automated fashion to serve up on a weekly or monthly basis. These are the most recent health code violations in your zip code. And it's that level of granularity that when you train on good processes that are principles based, it can then take the information and the context on the organization to then get even more granular to how these principles apply in that specific context. And you can automate all of that. You can automate the running of an agent to do all of that. There you go.
Absolutely. And in terms of, this context, do you, decide, these flows, let's say you go, into different waterfall effects into getting to the outcome. Do you give a goal to the agent or do you give a fixed process that, these are the things you need to look at and then, get to an outcome?
Yeah, again, so I run an agency. So like I did a ton of work around like how to standardize how work gets accomplished. So for us, we have 150 now standardized processes that are easily read by agents, which each process has a core goal associated to it. So for us, it's here are the principles that need to be accomplished. Here's the standard way of operating. Here are the core goals that need to be accomplished. And then we use the CRIT framework, which is context, role, interview, task. So context is like, here's all the additional context, which includes the SOP, additional information that's relevant on the specific account or task that we're trying to accomplish. Role is telling the agent who it needs to be. So we often say you're an ABM expert with 15 years of experience that sourced 100 million in revenue in the past however many years. Interview is, I think, the most important thing, which is please ask me more questions so that you have all the context you need to go and execute. And then task is then the intended outcome. So when you start your prompt like that, it then gets all this other information, and then you can set up an agent that then can run autonomously. And we run our autonomous agents through ClickUp. Shout out to ClickUp. But like we set them all up in that way on the front end, so they have the right way of thinking, and now they can just go and execute.
Absolutely. Sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's always so fascinating to me to hear how AI and agents are being leveraged in different industries. Like that's such a cool example, Mason, and the chat.
Thanks.
The chat agrees.
Absolutely. And Katie, in terms of, you running, a large team, I think when you look at any product or any solution or any workflow that you'd want to do, I think getting time back is the most important thing. How do you, find out like which tasks will enable your reps to actually sell a lot more and what is, just going to be overhead?
Yeah. So where I think agents are incredibly valuable is all the work surrounding the actual conversation that we're having with humans on the receiving end, right? So researching accounts, looking at CRM history, identifying relevant signals, figuring out who should be prioritized, right? Those are all things that matter, but they also eat up an enormous part of the average rep's day. If I have an SDR with 2 really productive hours of calling time, I don't want them spending half of that bouncing between Salesforce, LinkedIn, Google, and 5 other tools trying to piece together why they should call that person, right? I want AI to handle the prep work and have the rep, handle the context and building that human relationship. A good example of this is an MCP that we're launching tomorrow, like exclusive. But it allows AI agents to access our signals, right? So that we understand what specific people are showing interested in. So instead of an SDR manually hunting, they have the exact context, they have the suggested script to go after the right people, and they can spend more time building those human relationships, which ultimately is what they do and how they earn a living.
Absolutely. And another very hot take, we've seen billboards all over San Francisco for saying, stop hiring humans, etc. What do you think should still be, human, and where, the SDR and the reps would fit into the picture?
Yeah, so for me, and Mason may disagree with me here, I'm not sure, but judgment stays human, for me. There are parts of sales where being 90% correct is great. Research is one of them. Prioritization can be one of them. But there are other places where being wrong 10% of the time is completely unacceptable because you're trying to build a relationship with another human, right? If someone tells my SDR, hey, my company just went through layoffs, call me next quarter, I can't have an agent deciding 3 days later that a new signal means we should aggressively follow up, right? So if somebody mentions something personal or a competitor, internal politics, whatever that may be on a call, I want a person deciding how to navigate that. I think the human element becomes more important when someone is engaging with you and not less. And I think the funny part is that we've spent a lot of time trying to automate the part of sales that buyers actually care about while leaving SDRs buried in this like crazy administrative work that buyers couldn't care less about. I want the opposite. I think it's really important to automate the context and not automate the relationship.
Absolutely. What does that do to, your even pipeline of, people that you want to promote and grow over the organization, right? If you don't have an SDR trained well, because that's the fundamental job of any salesperson, right? Where you need to be, dialing people, talking to customers. If that goes away, what do you think the impact is on, the rest of the org chart?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some risks when it comes to, automating everything. And, I think there's a risk of sellers forgetting the basics of how to sell, right? If we're automating every single thing. Humans still need to understand the why behind why agents are making decisions and the reasoning, right? I think if you completely automate that and don't have any human element involved or any human approval, then how does that human understand their job and their role of sales and building relationships, right? The how needs to still be very obvious to the rep on the receiving end of all this information.
100%. Mason, what are your thoughts? Right? What are some of those key activities that you would want, where the ROI is the highest for a human to put most of their effort in and maybe use AI as an assistant pure?
Yeah, I mean, when I think through this, I agree with Katie on the general premise of like, obviously, humans should be final judgment. So even as we execute our processes, human prompts or human gives context when asked. AI does first draft, human reviews, AI reviews, and then we actually push it to a senior individual to do final review for taste and judgment. So I think of what still needs a human. I just view AI as now like interns or junior employees that, if you think of the large consulting firm or the legal firm and how they actually do work, they hire junior associates that do most of the research, that then present that to a senior partner, and then the senior partner does the presentation. Same thing. It's just instead of junior associates, it's now AI agents. And to the point of, well, are we mitigating our potential future pipeline and bench of talent? I don't think so. I just think that the current bench of people can likely do a lot more because we've removed them again from the hours of research. And I want to give a very practical example. We had a client that asked us, can you review our account scoring model to see how it lines up with your account progression model? So I took it and then I have a skill file on our account progression model that I then uploaded to Claude. So I took their model plus our model, and then it pressure tested it up against 1.2 trillion different scenarios. It took about 45 minutes, and it was like 97% of the time you're the same. Here's the 3% edge case. And I was like, great. Do you know how long it would have taken me to assess 1.2 trillion different scenarios? Longer than 45 minutes. So I still think, though, that if I had then Claude presented to the client, that would have been dumb. What instead I did, I was like, great. I then reviewed all the information. I actually found inaccuracies, to be clear, like I would with a junior associate. And then I prompted it to fix it. And then it did. And it was great. So that's the basic premise for me is what would have historically been a junior associate or a junior employee or a trainee, can we then one time teach an agent how to do it perfectly? And then instead of teaching people that are trainees how to do research that's super manual, that they all want to get of inevitably, how do we teach them how to use the tools that do the research on their behalf?
100%. Yeah. Moving over, what goes wrong and where we find problems. I think there's a question in the chat where Shreya is asking that they automated their first touch messages and their reply rates dropped, and they're wondering if we've seen that before or did we mess something up. Katie, you want to take a shot at that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think it is this is not, abnormal for when you automate first touch, you see a drop in reply rates. I think the biggest thing that you can do here is work with tools like Clay and N8N or wherever you're getting your signals to drop in custom variables, right? Personalization and relevance is always going to win in cold outbound. So make sure that you're using custom variables if you are going to automate any email steps today. Of course, our buyers are just hounded with email messages and calls and all of the things. You have to make it as relevant as possible. We've done a lot with custom variables in our messaging, the signal type. We've also pulled in, different things like job change, one-liners, case studies that are relevant to them. So it is possible to do that properly, but it takes a lot of back-end work and custom variables to, I think, make that happen. And there's some good tools out there. So connect with me. Happy to chat through it further.
Yep. Mason, I think there's another question, just from the previous topic. What are some of those, trillions of scenarios that you were talking about in terms of cloud checking?
Sorry, one more time. You cut out a little bit.
Yeah, a question from your previous topic that you spoke on in terms of what are those trillions of scenarios where you use cloud to automate it.
Yeah. So in that specific example, they had built out a highly complex account scoring model that factored in job title, interactions, the quality of those interactions, the frequency of those interactions. So their scoring model was somewhere in the range of, I think, 400 different variables. So then our account progression model, I really like simple stuff. So it's like, do they know you exist? Have they had multiple interactions with you? Do you have the right people involved and engaged? Have they actually raised their hand in some capacity? Have they engaged in a meaningful way? So, the example I give is we host a 7-hour workshop. If someone shows up and hangs out with me for 7 hours on ABM, I would consider that to be a meaningful interaction. So I think of it in those senses that are behavioral based because it's really hard to argue with behavior. So if you go to your sales team and say, hey, I want you to go call these people. They were on our pricing page, our schedule call page, and a book in our product page. Sales is typically pretty excited about that versus what happens often in ABM is marketing passes over a hot account and it's like, well, they just hit 80 points. And sales is like, what does that mean? And marketing is like, I don't really know. At which point everything falls apart. So the 1.2 trillion scenarios was taking their 400 variable scoring model up against our relatively simple behavior-based model and said, do these align in practice? So is it possible for someone to pass a gate in your behavior-based approach based on their scoring model? And 97% of the time, they were the same. 3% of the time, they were different, which also, side note, indicated to me they had a 400 variable thing that we simplified down to 8 core gates. And I was like, that's nice to know that we can make it really simple. But all I'd say, that's the basic premise. For everyone at home, what do you do with that information? If you have something that's really complex and something that's really simple, I would then compare the complex thing to see how often the complex thing results in the same thing as the simple thing. And if they get you to the same spot, use the simple one.
Yeah.
Yeah. My 2 cents on this, that in terms of, if something goes wrong with, automation and AI, there is a high chance that, your initial approaches may be wrong. So I think it's best to batch it up into, smaller segments, smaller sequences, to A/B test on those. As, Katie mentioned, dynamic variables. We take it one step further where we, have a self-improving pipeline based on, when emails are opened and clicked, we change it so that, that's how we tend to drive reply rates up. But yeah, your thoughts on multi-touch points? If emails are not working as the first touch point, what should the next action be at?
So I want to be very clear for a moment. Like I just referenced commercial cleaning. So like commercial cleaning, fun fact, not super on LinkedIn. Just not a thing. So
Mhm.
the standard consulting answer is like, be where your audience is. So if I were to give boilerplate examples that are like, whatever. So that's the first answer. It's just like actually be where your audience is. The second thing is as a perspective, I disagree with Katie on the idea that like you should automate the first step ever. Or like use maybe I don't Katie, that's kind of what I heard is like you can use more
That's fair.
variables.
That's
I don't
fair.
agree with that. My experience has been when you cohort accounts by like accounts and then you cohort them by similar reasons for reaching out, like earnings announcements or job changes or whatever, your templates can be largely the same. And then you can pull in variables using agents or AI, not agents. Oops. You can pull in different variables using AI or any data that you have. But my perspective has always been the first email should be manual to just like make sure that it's actually good. And then you can be far more templated in your follow-up emails because what we have found is more often than not, if you're reaching out to like accounts for like reasons, your messaging will be similar and doesn't need to vary that much. So long as you've been personalized in your first email to show that you've actually done research. And then if you have the same email thread for the rest of your emails, again, you're now following up around the problem that they're trying to solve versus like, looks like you and I both went to the same college. I have never found that one works. People still really like it, but like, I don't care that anyone else went to Mississippi College. I don't know that anyone did. But
What do you think about? I saw
have-
this on LinkedIn about your post.
What post?
What?
Did
I
you
don't know.
think about the opener where I read about your post about this and then you write your email after that?
Oh, not a fan. I think it's been used. Did somebody actually go to Mississippi College? Sorry.
Yeah.
This is the first time in my entire career that someone actually went to the same college than me. As me. What up, Justin? Connect with me on LinkedIn. Anyway, tangent. Bringing it back. Sorry, I'm going to bring it back. I don't find that works unless it's truly genuine. And what I mean by that is if there is somebody that's engaged with my content for like a year or even just like a couple of months, like I see when there are certain people that start to engage with me for a while. My immediate thought is when someone new engages, I'm like, give it like 3 weeks, they're going to try to sell me. 80% of the time I'm correct. The other 20%, they're actually just like really nice people that like enjoy ABM content, which is fun. So that's the basic thought process is like, if it's genuine, it's really hard to fake a genuine outreach for someone that's actually been engaged with your content for a while because that requires them to be engaged with your content for a while. If it's like you liked one post and was like, I literally loved your post, you should get my 15 qualified meetings a week. Not super genuine.
Yeah. I do want to push back a little bit on, and Mason, we knew that we would have some point of disagreement here, but I think where personalization and manual emailing is going to work varies by company, right? I want to be very clear that blanket statements of like what works, most of the time they're going to work for you. But in our data, we've figured out that actually the third email in our sequence is where we need to have a lot of manual relevance and manual work from the SDR. That's where we get the most eyes. Not sure why, but that's what the data tells us, and we're digging into that. So always be sure that you are digging into your own internal data to understand where manual touches make sense, where agents and AI can automate for you, because it's going to look different for everyone and every single industry.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
if I
I
can
think
piggyback on that for just 1 second, Katie is hitting on essentially baseline metrics. So I say this with love to everyone here. Everything we're talking about today should be viewed as external benchmarks. Do not take what we say as gospel. Take them as a good starting point, and then go test it in your own organization. And when your data tells you something different, listen to that. I've never been in your CRM. I don't know what's going on there. I just know what's happened across all the other clients that we've worked with. And from my experience, what I have found more often than not is that manual personalization and review on the first email does better than full automation end to end. Katie's finding something different in her baseline data, which is great. Love that for her. You should do the same.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's where, good systems have to come in, where whether it's your CRM, your Outbound tool, you have to have, very strong reporting metrics, what you're looking at, and, what you're using to then personalize, because people just change sequences based on what they read on LinkedIn, or, some guru saying that, call before emailing or whatever. And, they just spend a lot of effort into that.
Yeah. We agree. We all agree. Look at us.
What do you think, is a good segue into this topic, where do you draw the line between, human and AI? I know, Katie, you mentioned about, 2 hours of cold calling is better than an agent reaching out overnight. Mason, what are your thoughts on, where do you really draw the line? Where do you think your customers do?
So where we draw the line with AI is, again, final deliverables, or final things. So our goal is that we have AI, because again, a lot of our stuff is principles based. So what I mean by that is, like, we analyze what works, establish core principles, and now agents can do a lot of the strategic work based on the appropriate context. So where humans need to come in is what's referred to as nuance, which is not super hot on LinkedIn, but nuance, very important, and taste. So what we want to do is just make sure AI and agents do drafts with great prompting on the front end and good context, and that humans come at the end to nuance, to look at something and say, yeah, no, I don't think that's right. Human judgment is still super important at the end of the day. And all AI does is it's a tool. And I want to be very clear for people. If you have AI do a ton of your work for you, you'll still get fired if it's bad. So, like, it's pretty good at drafts, but at the end of the day, I remember this quote, and it really helped me out a lot, thinking, like, why is AI still not going to be the end all be all? Today, right now, AI cannot go create an LLC. AI cannot apply for a job that it holds independently on its own. It is still a tool that people use. So people at the end of the day are held responsible for the output that an AI creates, which is why, one, as an entrepreneur, I get compensated for taking the risk that I take to found this business. And as an employee, you'll grow in your career, because the more responsibility you can manage well, the better you should be compensated and grow in your career. So the line at the end of the day is, the buck still stops with the human. And that's where I think the greatest opportunity is for people that learn how to use AI really, really well, is if you can get a lot of stuff done and it's all still of quality, you'll grow in your career. So there you go.
Katie, what do you think, using AI for training, especially in cold calling and, using scripts, etc.? I think AI is a goldmine of data once we have a lot of those call transcripts in for our sales reps. Where do you think, using that beneficial?
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. We have, Gong transcripts, and, we use Nooks for dialing. So there's an AI there as well, right? All of that data is feeding into rep scorecards that we create on a weekly basis. They can create them whenever they want, but when we have our big one-on-one every week, we know exactly what they've said over the phones, what they've said on their emails, everything. And AI analyzes that in comparison to what is actually converting to sales accepted opportunities, right? And says, here's what you can change, right? So we're able to get a lot more granular with SDR training than we ever have before. And it's unlocking this huge potential for personalized KPIs, right? Which I think is a huge advantage for an SDR team, right? I can say, oh, this guy needs to make X amount of calls versus this one needs to make X. And, personalized KPIs are a huge benefit of AI entering kind of the enablement conversation. I think it's massive when you're able to use data and actually back up where you are enabling your reps with said data, and do small groups for different groups of SDRs that are struggling with different things, you're maximizing the time that they get to go out and build those human relationships versus being stuck on an enablement training over something that they really don't need help with. So
Absolutely. Go on.
Can we really just quickly answer this question from Nicholas? Because I think it's I was on another panel recently around like how to use agents in your workflows. And a lot of people talked about like, we have all this amazing data. But again, as I've now audited lots of CRMs, most people don't. Like they're still struggling to get their reps to put in closed loss reasons. So like we're like associate context to a deal record. So we actually know who's involved in that buying committee. So Nicholas, what I find works really well is one, using agents around standardized processes so that you can actually map out workflows. And then the easiest way to do that is look at all the work that you do and say, where can I today leverage AI? And then you just use AI for that the first time. And you do that a lot. And then inevitably, you're like, oh, cool. I have a set of standardized workflows that agents can take off of my plate. So that's step one. None of that requires data as like a plugging into a system because you're automating components of a process. Inevitably, once you've got really good processes, what you find is that most of your processes start because someone had data. Now, sometimes that data is just a conversation. Other times it's like profitability data. But at the end of the day, there was context. Another way of saying context is data was put into an agent to then execute a set of tasks. So to start building out data, one, it starts with like pipeline health, which is the same thing as always. But like, do we have closed loss reasons? Do we actually know who's involved in our sales cycles? Do we have call recorders? I used to think people were crazy when they would say like, you have to have call recorders. And I used to look at the pricing. I was like, super expensive. It's not. It's like $15 a month per person to get direct feedback from your potential customers on why they will or will not buy from you. Side note also, there are now, like it's super easy. It's been easier than ever to like track every email. So if you record every call and you track every email, all of that context is actually unstructured data that can be fed into AI that then like standardized processes gives you structured outputs, which is like amazing. So I think when people hear the word data, they think spreadsheets. And I just think anything that we would feed into anything ever is data. And more often than not, it's just good conversations. So that's where I'd start is close won analysis, close loss analysis, understanding client profitability. Your finance team has that. And then just mapping out your workflows into standardized processes and figuring out what data you need to feed in so that an agent can go and execute. And then eventually you do stuff with like Influ 2, where you integrate an MCP into your tech stack or your AI tool of choice, and then the agent can actually go and execute actual programs. But for now, starting with just good processes where you start it and then it does the output and then you take the output and you go run with it is the best place to start. Hopefully that was helpful for everybody.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good segue into this point too. I think like sales tech has made the mistake for years of buying technology first and inventing the workflow second. And just like Mason was talking about, like start with the friction, start figuring out where in your process, what all the steps are that you can potentially replace with an agent. It's absolutely a great point, Mason.
Yep, I think we've dropped one of our, stack orders in the chat. So a lot of you can go there and, put in your details and see, where, you're getting optimized. Like we've, spoken, I think your data is the most valuable, set of metrics that you should be using and making decisions on. Principles can only guide you into which direction to look at. At the end, the judgment should be, whether it's win-loss or call analysis, it should be based on, your stack and your audit. Anything specifically, Katie, you look for when auditing your stack or, sitting on a quarterly review in terms of what's working, what's probably not useful?
Yeah, I mean, I think Mason kind of covers the rep side of things, right? I want to look at my team and look at how much time they're researching, how much time they're moving between systems, etc., right? And I want that to become my automation roadmap and make sure that that's aligned with those areas in which I can save my reps time on that mundane kind of admin stuff, right? The other thing that I would audit is how much data you're already paying for that your reps never actually use. I think that's kind of important, and not a lot of people talk about that, but a lot of companies have a context problem. They have intent over here, CRM activity here, marketing engagement all over the place, call recording somewhere else, like Mason mentioned. And then we expect an SDR to put all of that together in, the 5 or 6 minutes before a cold call, if they even have that time. Most SDRs are parallel and power dialing. And I think that's where AI can be incredibly useful, not generating more activity, not blasting out more emails, but connecting that context so that the rep can walk into the conversation more prepared. So I'm always looking for, those things in our current stack and in, different tools that we evaluate for the team.
Yeah, I think the integration story also has, a big cost benefit, because let's say some people use power dialing more, some people send more emails out. I think if you buy multiple tools for different processes, you just have that overhead where, users are not using as much as they should be. And, integrating them could make sure that somebody else gets more use out of a certain feature that they prefer using.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I think, we'll move over to some questions that the audience would have. I think had a great session and look forward to questions.
I think we answered most of them.
I mean, if you want me to go another rant around tech stacks, I'm happy to do that for a second. Like,
I think it's a never-ending conversation. We can go all and all for tech stacks that people use.
Do it.
All right, fairly.
Yes is the answer.
All right, so if we go back to the idea of check your stack, fun fact, Scrappy ABM was built on the premise that you actually don't need any more technology to build out an ABM program. So I'm very passionate about this topic. But the way that we try to audit all stacks and audit pretty much everything is just, again, process first. So when you think about all work is just a series of inputs and outputs that are workflow based. So we hire people with the intent that they will own a set of workflows. What we then want to do is actually document what those workflows are and create clarity around what the goals of each of those workflows should be. So in the context of a marketing program, you got to do something that gets people to know you exist. My favorite line is, I can guarantee with 100% certainty that someone is more likely to buy from you if they know that you exist versus if they do not. So if you have 0 programs that help people know you exist, really tough for them to buy from you. It's make sure that exists. And then from there, build pain, educate on solutions, the standard stuff. But there's a set of workflows in that. So again, to Katie's point, a lot of people have gone and bought technology first and then let the technology dictate what their workflows should be. We think of all audits through what is the actual work that needs to be accomplished in order to hit our specific goals. And then from my perspective, you should bulldoze that. So what I mean by that is just go brute force, choose violence, just get the work done. And then once you've actually gotten the work done for the first time, you then have a process that is a radically imperfect process. But the first time you actually do the work, you'll probably get 50 to 60% of the process done. From there, you go back and optimize that process to actually create clarity on what the steps that were required to be taken. And then from there, you try to delegate the work and see what work can be delegated. And then once the work has been delegated, you can also then look at, we might be able to buy a tool that could automate this, at which point you then automate or standardize the work. And now, again, in the world of agents, delegation could happen to a tool versus a person, which is crazy. But that's how you audit the stack. And then fun fact, when you do all of that, you look at your tech stack and find, oh, there's stuff we're paying for that we're not using. And if we stop paying for this, we would have 0 negative impact, at which point that's a huge win and finance loves you. So that's what I would do to audit your tech stack and then actually identify what is needed. And fun fact, if you go and actually remove things from your budget for finance and you're new in your job and you do that in your first 90 days, it's easier to get yeses down the road. And I can guarantee if you're starting a new job, you will find things that are not being used in the first 90 days where you can go ahead and get a win with finance too. So there's my soapbox.
Another question is, are signals getting commoditized and crowded these days? And if so, where do you look for real signals?
I am very passionate about this one, so I will go first. I think publicly accessible signals are absolutely getting crowded these days, right? Funding, moving jobs, etc. Not to say they don't work, but I do think it is important to have another signal source, to look at your first party data, right? Who is signing up for webinars, who's attending your events, but also, I am spoiled in this area to work at Influ2, where we do, contact level advertising and different intent signals like search, etc. Those signals are where my team is currently winning right now because they aren't crowded, right? So I think finding tools where you can have signals that aren't crowded and commoditized is definitely the way to go. Or if you are actioning on those publicly accessible signals like everyone else is, make sure that you are doing so in a very timely manner and that you're doing so with a lot of relevance. And that is the kind of situation where I think there should be human touches in there versus the automation. If it is automated, it has to be incredibly relevant and looked over by a human, in my opinion.
I disagree with most of what Katie said. So not on the first party. First party is obviously the best data, but on the idea that like everyone is using these signals, I think everyone talks about using these signals. I think the execution is typically extraordinarily poor. So from my experiences, we've audited, again, like 100 companies in the past 3 years. There are so many basics and fundamentals that are still not getting executed. So we keep doing like new stuff when like we haven't done the basics. So my like standard spiel is, if you went after those that had missed a meeting with you, if you went after those that were on your website, if you intentionally re-engaged closed lost, if you intentionally sourced referrals, if you intentionally went and won back former customers, and you intentionally had a planned pre-event to like book meetings pre-event, that's 6 standardized playbooks that exist that most people have not actually standardized. So what they do is whenever pipeline gets low, they freak out and they're like, we got to run a closed loss program, or I got to go get it. And it's like, but closed loss is always there. 60% of deals on average are lost due to reasons that can change. Like most deals that are lost lose to no decision or doing it internally. So if you just systematically engage closed loss, you'd make more money. Anyway. So my first thought is, just because everyone's doing it, we shouldn't do it, is a really bad argument because most people still aren't. So that's the first thing. Second thing, with all signals, my goal is to take third-party signals that are not in our CRM, that are like sourced from someone else, and use those as door openers to then create actual one-to-one relationships so that we can engage based on the actual interactions between us and our brand, or between us and the accounts as a unique brand. So Katie, 100% correct that the best signals will always be, they showed up to this webinar that we hosted and engaged super heavily in the chat. Or, if I were to follow up with Justin and be like, LOL, let's talk about going into Self-Hall and how I thought it was so funny that the business school was called Self at Mississippi College, which is true. And I made many jokes about it being selfish because the business school was selfish, personalization. There you go. But like that might actually create a one-to-one connection with Justin out of this webinar that I wouldn't otherwise have. So it's those kinds of things that are first-party data that accelerate relationships, but third-party signals are still underutilized and shouldn't be used to book meetings, but should be used to start relationships that you then accelerate through first-party data.
Yeah. So my take is, people discount their own signals they have in the CRM, which are a goldmine, because they think they're paying for something externally and that may be better. But I think overlooking information in the CRM is the most common thing we have seen across all our customers using it for outbound, managing inbound leads. They always trust what Bambora or Demandbase or one of these external providers would give, but they have most of the data in their CRM as to what stuff has happened, and they don't use that for personalizing. All right. I think I don't see any more questions. I think just lastly, we have another webinar coming up that's more for mid-sized teams that want to punch above their weight and see how they can outperform it. So you can head over to Tario.ai's website and register for that. But other than that, I think Mason, Katie, it's been an honor speaking to you guys, and I think it's been a valuable session for everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Jared's back.
This was a tremendous conversation, y'all. I loved hearing the different perspectives and point of views and how you operate. There's often two ways to skin a cat, so to speak. And thank you all for coming. Thank you to the tremendous sponsor, Tario. Like, they've been doing tremendous programming in our community. You see in front of you things that they're doing outside of it as well. Support them. They're building a tremendous product. Samvit is an incredible founder, and the team is next level. So thank you so much. Thank you to Mason and Katie, who are both the best at what you all do. Hearing, you drop knowledge from your end of the world is just, or share it rather, is it helps make us all smarter. And thank you all for coming today. This has been awesome.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. It's been a great conversation and look forward to seeing you guys.
Bye, everyone.
All right, we will have a recording for this sent out and posted on our site, so stay tuned. Have an awesome day, everybody.
Thank you.